Words carry vibration. And so as we were talking a little bit before around leadership, about 4 years ago, I realized that leadership as a word carries a vibration of there is a ship in there. And so with a ship, there is only ever one captain. So when we're looking at leadership, it's who's the captain, who's driving the boat. And so I actually came up with a different terminology that I call leader self. And that's about igniting the leader that lives inside of all of us so that we can then lead from an internally referenced space and become the invitation for others to do the same thing.
Welcome to the People Powered Solutions podcast. In this show, you'll gain expert advice and tips on building a thriving workplace culture with happy employees. I'm your host, Lorianne Duguay, and I'm thrilled to be spending this time with you today. Hello and welcome to another episode of People Powered Solutions. Have we got a treat for you today, folks? We are welcoming transformation maven, speaker, and international best-selling co-author and author of a recently published book called Breath Sensation Words. Lisa Weiss creates experiential learning environments, inviting her clients to shift their mindset, transform their relationships, and evolve their world. Lisa's work integrates heart and head. Her methodology invites new perspectives utilizing the power of breath, words, and the sensory cues in your body. She works with individuals who feel lost, alone, and misunderstood. Her programs help those who are stressed out, exhausted, and who find themselves sabotaging their relationships professionally and personally. As a speaker, she believes in engaging the audience in conversations. Her intention, create an inclusive experiential experience that invites participants into their bodies. Lisa lives in Montreal, Canada. Fellow Canadian, love it. Loves traveling, outdoor activities, and engaging in life-changing conversations. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to chat with you, and I'm so excited for you to share some of your methodologies with our listeners. So Lisa, how about you share with us how you got to doing what you do?
Oh, that's a whole long story that we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to give you the short of the long of it is, I've always been about communicating. Right. I started off as a communication strategist. I went into facilitation. And in the last 12 years, it's been coaching. And it's always revolved around how people communicate inside themselves and then how we communicate outside of ourselves with others. And so all of my work, because no matter where I went, I had this insatiable curiosity and how people work in teams and how they work within family systems and all of that. And so for me, it's all about we come in to come out and noticing the connections between the two.
Wow. We come in to come out. I love that and understanding that. So are you able to share maybe how you typically work with a client?
Yeah. So
what does that look like?
Right. So when I'm working within organizations, usually they're bringing me in either because as a coach for one-to-one coaching, maybe they have a problem child. And
yes, I'm pretty sure every organization have one of those.
Right.
Or several.
Or someone wants to develop skills around something. Also with teams, right? In terms of how a team might be working with each other. I used to do workshops that I called communicating from the inside out, because we talk about listening skills and all of these things, which are great. But until we actually understand how and why we do the things we do, it's just surface level. And so for me, it's about helping them take their employees into the deep dive so that they can find out the why. What's driving the thing that's causing me to make the choices that I'm choosing? What's driving me to say the things that I'm saying?
What are some of those? Is it an iceberg analogy where stuff happening below the surface, right? And getting to the bottom of that iceberg to really, because once you get to the bottom, I imagine you unearth the true root and then you can make a plan to correct or mitigate that issue.
Exactly. Because for me, when in a whole, I have three mantras: shift your perspective, transform your relationships, evolve your world. And so, whether that world is personally or professionally, when it say evolve your world, evolve your team and evolve the space in which the organization sits in, so that everyone is now working from their best self.
Oh,
And because my background is in communications, words are my superpower, and words carry vibration. And so, as you were talking a little bit before around leadership,
uh-huh.
about 4 years ago, I realized that leadership as a word carries a vibration of there is a ship in there. And so, with a ship, there is only ever one captain.
Mm.
So, when we're looking at leadership, it's who's the captain, who's driving the boat. And so I actually came up with a different terminology that I call leader self. And that's about igniting the leader that lives inside of all of us, so that
Mm.
we can then lead from an internally referenced space and
Oh,
become the invitation for others to do the same thing.
love, 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 love. So this notion of shared leadership. We're all leaders. And so you help them unearth that leadership within themselves for every member of the team so that they can collectively
Yes,
work towards that shared purpose. I
exactly.
absolutely adore that. So,
Because that becomes accountability for self. Because now
mm,
I know, oh, this is what ignites me. This is what fires me up. This is where I bring my best self. And then
mm,
when everybody's doing that, because we recognize, oh, right, as a family system, the workplace is a replication of our family system.
it is.
And
It
so once
absolutely
we
is.
become aware of the fact that what's things that are being activated inside of me is because something is familiar around that. And so, yeah, so we do the deep dive around, okay, who reminds you of mom, dad, siblings, cousins, aunts,
Oh.
teachers, right? Because that's what's being activated inside of you, not necessarily the person.
Interesting, because I think and not necessarily, I've had colleagues who reminded me of like that aunt, not just an aunt, like that specific aunt, and whether there's a negative or a positive connotation attached to that, I imagine it must also elicit some level of a trigger, right? If it is that negative connotated aunt, you're associating this person with someone who has wronged you in the past in your personal life, well, you're carrying that into work, whether you realize it or not, is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you'll notice that, you use the word trigger, and that's the word that everybody uses. And trigger as a word is a very violent word. And
Mm.
it's a word that the connotation of something is coming from outside of me. When someone pulls the trigger, so of a gun, it's coming from outside of you, right?
Mhm. You're
So
pulling it
I use the
towards you.
word activate. So I might be in a conversation with someone, they might say or do, or I don't know, something, and something gets activated inside of me. Because now I get to go, this is about me, because this is
Oh,
happening inside of me. So even shifting
oh
that
yeah.
one word takes it from something outside, from someone outside of me to, oh, this is about me. I can take ownership of this.
And it affords a level of control, right, over the situation.
Yeah.
Interesting how that it did shift. The connotation did shift. And number one, I'm going to be super paranoid about every word, knowing that you're a words expert and a communications expert. Now I'm going to be very choosy with my words. But I did see a shift there from, the trigger, thinking that it's all about, I have no control over these triggers, but activating something was activated in me makes me think, okay, what's that about?
Right.
What can I do about that? How do I own that activation? And then what can I maybe pivot or change? And you can give me why maybe those words aren't good.
Yeah, no, those are great words. And so, when you think about the book that I just published, Breath, Sensations, Words, right? When you think of, oh, something got activated inside of me, then in the work that I do, I help my clients understand that there are 4 breaths, 4 elemental breaths: earth, air, water, and fire. And so when something gets activated, it's about playing with the breaths so that the breaths actually move the information, so they can get access to different information about what it is, so they can have a different conversation inside themselves. And that works with the sensory cues. So what's happening? What's the active? Is it in my head? Is it in my stomach? Is it in my back? Or am I feeling hot? Am I feeling cold? Am I feeling muscle spasms? Am I feeling butterfly? Like, all of these things is information. And then
Oh,
we use breath as a way to engage the information so that you can have a different insight about what it is.
so hence the sensation is to cue in where the sensation is. You referenced your book. I want you to tell us, are you okay with giving us a bit of a
Oh,
preview?
absolutely. So, I actually have a little copy here that I can show people, so this is Breath. This is it, Breath, Sensations, Words. And
Perfect.
it's on Amazon. And basically, it's an introduction to the work that I do. And it starts off with the breath and going through each of the breaths: earth, air, water, fire. There's a little bit of history about it, what it does, the role it plays. And then it introduces the sensory cues in the body, because a lot of people are like me. I lived in my head all the time. I was disconnected from my body.
Mm,
If I said I was angry, I was just angry. And I couldn't tell you what was being fired off inside of me. So my whole journey has been about discovering all of these sensory cues that get fired off in my body, to go, oh, what's this? And if I engage a fire breath, what information gets released? And when I engage an earth breath, what information gets released, so that I can become more aware of who I am and what has been activated, so I can have a different conversation with the
so
person.
shift that
So,
conversation. Love,
yes.
love.
So I'll give you an example. This involves my ex-husband. We had this knife block, and he always put the knives in a certain way. And I seem to never be able to put the knives in the correct way in the knife block. And so one time, he's like, oh my God, Lisa, I can't believe that why can't you put the knives in? I don't hear from you when I put it in 500 times the right way. Anyway, I engage the fire breath. Walk away, walk away, walk away. Breathe, 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 fire breath. And as I engage the fire breath, and then my body settled, immediately what came to mind was, of course, it's not about the fire. It's not about the knife block.
Nice. Yes.
It was about how when I was younger, I could never get it right.
Hmm.
And so every time we had this conversation, that 8-year-old was activated in, I can't get it right.
Hmm.
And so in that moment, I was then able to go back and have a very, very different conversation with
Hmm.
him about that. And then I didn't have to create that anymore. And it's the same thing with business. It's the same thing when I was working in teams, and someone, I might be bumping up against someone. And it was like, I know this is about me. And just to stay in the curiosity of what that is, and recognizing with one person, it was because every time she opened her mouth, I just wanted to like take her and shake her and say, get to the point of your story. And I
Yes.
realized, like, in this one moment, it was like time froze as I engaged an air breath. And it was, right. Because when I was young, when we got home from school, it was, do you have homework? What do you need to do? Give it, and then go off and do whatever you needed to do. I didn't have time. I never was invited to meander and talk about my day and say who I saw and what I did. And so, of course, anybody that meandered in a conversation activated
Would
an
activate you.
irritation
Hmm.
inside of me. And
Interesting.
so, yeah.
Powerful examples. I love it. I'm an everything disc fanatic. I'm also I use everything disc tools in all I do. So their personality assessment. Are you familiar with them at
Yes.
all? So
Yes.
as you're speaking, it's so funny because what you're sharing is providing an additional tool in my toolbox, because I've always, as you're telling stories, I'm like, oh, well, that person was likely this style, and probably this is what was being activated. It was just interesting to hear it. But now to recognize, not only from a self-awareness perspective, that this is how I'm wired, these are my preferences, needs, and tendencies, but it sounds like your technique kind of helps you understand how I got to have these preferences, needs, and tendencies, right?
Yes, exactly.
And if there are some pieces, when I'm coaching clients or working with clients and they're trying to change or stretch beyond what their wired go-to reactions are, I think your technique could be extremely helpful in terms of helping them unearth the why behind, take that deep dive, like you said, and really get to the root so they can then make a plan to have a different conversation, as you say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is because once we understand the thing that's driving it, and I've come up with a process and a model that helps people to identify 3 states that we cycle through: disembodied, cerebral, and aware. So we're either not in here, we're either in our heads, or we're aware of something going on, but we don't know what to do about it.
You can't put our finger on it quite.
Put our finger on it, right?
Okay.
We're trying all kinds of different things, but we can't put our finger on it. And to become aware of, okay, am I in here, or have I vacated? Am I planning? Am I already 10 steps down the conversation before we even get to that part of the conversation, right? And so when you become aware of that and what sensory cues get fired off in your body associated with that, and then you engage a breath to actually bring you into the present moment, everything shifts.
Okay. I want you to backtrack a bit because this was super interesting. Can you walk us through those stages and tell us what are some of the questions going through our mind at each of those stages? And maybe how can we quickly check in? What does that look like?
So if you think about disembodied, we're not in here. And this usually happens when we feel embarrassed about something, when we might feel ashamed about something, when we might have a very intense reaction around something, and it's like abort, right? We need
jump ship. That's it. I'm out.
Right? Jump ship. I'm out of here. Right. And so in there, we disconnect. You have no thought. You're operating out of habit. Kind of like
autopilot. You're on autopilot.
Like driving a standard car. When you first start driving, you're paying attention to everything, and then after a while, you don't even think about it, right? You're on autopilot. So that's the disembodied. You're not in there. The cerebral, like it says, you're in your head. You have got a plan A to Z and then back again. You have had the conversation inside of you so many times that when you're actually in the conversation, you're reacting to the conversation you had in your head.
You already had, oh my God, that has happened to me. So it's this overthinking state where you think you can keep yourself safe from any of those, embarrassing moments.
Right.
Having a pre-scripted answer for every possible question.
Yes, exactly.
And then you're listening to respond and not to understand.
Exactly. And that's exhausting, right? So you're tired because you are constantly working at that. Right. And then the aware state is you might become aware. Okay, I know that I'm acting or reacting a certain way in situations, or this person, when I'm with this person, I feel this. And so you might read a book, you might go talk to somebody about it, but you just can't put your finger on what it is, right? So we're out of alignment. In those 3 states, we're out of alignment. And so what I do is when I come in, I help people to identify those states, because we all cycle through all of them, right? There's a linear thing. We could cycle through all of them in milliseconds. And when you can come to this state of alignment where you are solid within yourself, and that involves taking a breath and bringing yourself into the moment, among other things, then you can get information that you didn't have access to. Those strategies that worked for so long have stopped working. And this is what happens. We have these brilliant strategies and then they stop working. And so when, especially in team environments and in organizations, oh, this person does this and this person's like that, there's intelligence behind every action that everyone has and does. And it's about becoming curious about that, because there's intelligence behind it. And then that gets activated inside of you as you engage with this other person. There's intelligence to that. And it's about getting curious about that as well.
What's that about, and uncovering that?
Right.
So are you able to give us an example of how the work you do might manifest in the workplace from a leader's self perspective? See what I did there?
Love
the
that.
word up. Change the word up.
Absolutely. So I find that I'm most effective with people who are starting in the management field, like they want to become a supervisor, a manager, or they might be new to it. And they take all the classes and courses around all the things that they have to
leader self-development. Yes.
The leadership development, how you manage people, right? And then I come in and I go, okay, we're going to take all that, wonderful, because it's a good skill set to have. And now we're going to talk about what's your belief behind leader, around being leader? What are the rules that you have in place that you may not be aware of around what it means to be a leader, right? Where does that come from? And that's where the whole family conversation comes in, because we model leadership and authority from our family system. And so to begin to understand this, I had a mentor once, very strong, powerful woman, and would go toe to toe with anybody. And she was telling a story one day about how she was in a meeting with an executive, and they would have these really big discussions. And in this one moment, he slammed his hand on the desk and she shut down. And she was like, and he was like, what's going on? Like, I don't understand what's going on. And she didn't understand until she unpacked it later. And she realized when she was growing up around the kitchen table, when they were having a conversation and they were done, when her father was done in the conversation, that's what he did. Slammed his hand down, and that was it. And so it's in that, it's the learning of these strategies that we don't know is happening.
Do you find that once we know what is happening and what is actually happening and what is being activated and why, does that minimize the impact on future interactions?
Yes.
Once you acknowledge it, then, to use your language, you understand how to have a different conversation.
Right. Exactly.
How to reframe to minimize the impact of that activation.
Right. And it's not even to minimize it, it's just to acknowledge it. I think, the fact that acknowledging the truth of our experience is powerful.
And it is powerful. And it's interesting because I do conflict management, conflict resolution, and often it is things that are happening, that are transpiring, and people are operating, I'm assuming, to use your language, in this disembodied state, and they don't realize that your behavior is being 100% guided by some of those. You don't know what's really happening here. Some of those situations that are governing these activations and are then kind of prescribing the behavior to address it. It's so interesting because I'd be curious to apply your technique to some of these ongoing cyclical type toxic personalities that show up in every workplace, and how can we work with them, kind of work with the root cause of most of that toxicity.
Right.
In helping create and foster that self-awareness they need to see whether or not they pivot that behavior. It's super
right. Exactly. Because, it's this notion of Newtonian science says that we're mechanistic, and so that we need to be fixed. And so going into a conversation with that intention, that mindset of this needs to be fixed, is the first step of, well, what if nothing's broken?
I was about to say, from a words perspective, like fixed, again, I'm feeling I'm broken and I'm not worthy, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
starting to see this power of words.
It was about, now that's an intelligent reaction. Help me to understand the reaction.
Hmm.
Very different.
That helped me to understand your perspective also is a huge game changer. I use that one in a lot of my conflict resolution workshops instead of, I don't agree with you. How about take the route of, you're clearly seeing this from a completely different angle than me. Can you help me understand your perspective? Because
Right.
that provides the opportunity to explain, to provide additional information, as opposed to initiating or activating a defense mechanism, right? Where I have to prove myself. And it's so interesting how words are that powerful. A lot of my coaching clients talk about wanting to be more assertive in their interactions. Leaders saying they feel they're not quite when they have to deliver the more courageous conversations or have those hard talks, they're not showing up like they would like. And when we discuss a bit further, we realize that they're using a very passive language, very passive words. I'm thinking that you might want to, maybe if we could, should. Do you have advice in terms of how they could find that assertive voice?
Right. Absolutely. So first, it's about owning the truth of their experience.
Okay.
Understanding the intelligence behind that, because they've learned that somewhere along the line of their experience, that what they have to say may not be accepted or have any power to it. And this is where the breath for me comes in, because when I'm solid inside myself, so if you take an air breath, is when you inhale and then you exhale and you hold on the exhale. And then you inhale and then you bring it up. You bring yourself fully inside yourself.
Body. Yeah.
And so when you're in yourself, because you might be disembodied at this point, when you bring yourself in and you look at the person in their eyes and you say, this, all of you is saying this, not that little part of you. So, to take that example that you're giving a little bit further, in those instances, I often ask, how old are you? Because the person that's speaking in that moment is not the adult you. It's maybe the 5-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 14-year-old, the 20-year-old, right? And so recognizing in those moments when you feel like you don't have power, how old am I?
Hmm.
And so to bring yourself, take that breath and bring yourself into the present moment, knowing you have all the capacity and all the ability to deliver this, because you have something important to say, because everything that you have to say is there to help the other person.
That is extremely insightful. I like that. So that's your air breath. I feel like we were onto something here. So air breath.
So that was the earth breath. That was the
earth breath. Sorry, earth breath.
Yes.
My Lord, I should take notes. Earth breath. And now can we talk about can you go through quickly what those 4 breaths might sound or feel like?
So the earth breath is a grounding breath, right? It solidifies things. And in the book, I talk about there are also 2 sides to every breath. So as much as the earth breath is a grounding and it brings you in, it also can compact information. So if you want to avoid something, you might take the earth breath to go, okay, now's not the time for this to come up. So I'm going to compact it with the earth breath, right? So there are 2 sides to the breath. The air breath is the opposite to the earth breath, in that you inhale and you hold on the inhale. And then you hold for maybe, 4 to 8 counts, and then you exhale. Then you inhale immediately and you hold on the inhale. And then you exhale. And the air breath is, if you think about air, it's all about beliefs, values, and attitudes, who I believe myself to be and who I believe I have the potential to become. Right? So when you think about the air breath, it's about, okay, what beliefs am I holding around this? The water breath is that continuous flow. You're inhaling and you're exhaling, and there's no stopping on the inhale, or finding your natural rhythm. And with the hundreds of people that I've worked with, most of us don't know what our natural rhythm of breathing is, because most of us hold our breaths. We inhale, it's like an extended air breath. We inhale and we hold 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 and then we exhale and then we inhale again, we hold it. Right.
Every so often when I get really stressed, I feel like I'm like, oh yeah, I have to breathe. That's right. I need to breathe here, because I'm like doing these shallow, really quick breaths without realizing it. Yeah.
So to actually discover what your natural rhythm of breathing is the water breath. And that's all about flow. And that creates flow in the body for things to move, right? And to be processed. I mean, every breath processes information, and it processes information differently. And then we have my favorite, which is the fire breath. And nobody ever does the fire breath. Kids do the fire breath. Or sometimes they do. And so that's like,
right? For listeners, because this is, she's like bringing her arms up and down. How would you describe it for our listeners?
So it's like a baffle. So you bring your arms up to about eye level and the inhale, and then you push all the air out. And then you bring your arms up again to about eye level, and then you push it out. So it's like, right? And that's the fire breath. And so that fire breath, to discover what lies beneath the surface of that, right, is what the fire breath is all about.
To burn off what's obscuring. I like it.
Right.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Thank you for providing those 4 types of breath and giving us a better idea of when would you use which breath and why. That's really helpful. I think I would talk with you for another 2 hours. Obviously, we've had conversations before, and we know that we'd be quite capable. If our listeners would like to continue chatting with you and continue the conversation, or even if they wanted to get a copy of your book, how can they continue to connect with you?
So they can get a copy of my book on Amazon. It is available on Amazon.com and CA, available globally. And they can visit my website at www.lisajweiss.com. And I'm always running all different kinds of conversation programs and ways for people to engage differently. I've got a multitude of videos up on YouTube, so they can check out my YouTube channel, and I've got a series on the breaths that are there, so they can go check them out, practice with them, and see where it takes you. So I'm always available and up for a conversation.
I feel like this was more of an appetizer or an appetizer, because you gave us kind of enough to want to know more about it. And then we can start to understand when to use which breath. And when we're struggling and grappling with something, then we'll know exactly which breath to engage to be able to work through that. So thank you, Lisa, for joining us. Thank you for sharing so generously with our listeners. Definitely encourage you all to check it out and to continue understanding breath sensations and words to help you on your daily, basically. So thanks everyone for yet another insightful episode, and we hope you tune in next week. Well, folks, thanks for joining us for yet another enriching conversation. To hear more about today's guest, make sure to check out the links in the description of this episode. Want to continue the conversation? Then head on over to our social media platforms, all of which are also linked in the description, to keep it going. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss another valuable episode.